All right.
Well, Greg.
If you'll just follow me, we'll get started.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Look at this. 8, 9.
And we'll just go right in here.
These two are going to stay together, most likely.
Just go ahead and please have a seat.
You're gonna do the backside? The backside is my best side, right?
Yeah.
I had a lady on the bus with me. I lost her. We were outside.
Can I get 3 more? Yeah, we're good. We're okay.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more if we can get in there.
Yeah, we're splitting the groups into 2, so that way we'll be able to entertain questions and just keep it nice and comfortable. So thank you all for coming out and making us part of your day. Does anybody have any questions before we get started with the video?
Yeah. Why did you put Voice of America right in Ohio and not near the coast or anything for broadcasting?
You know, that is an excellent question, and that's addressed in the video. So that should answer it, and then we can go into more detail as we go through the museum. But that's a fascinating question, and it's right on target.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So let me just go ahead and get.
When did they quit broadcasting?
We quit broadcasting here in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
It just became more cost-effective to go over the internet than to do shortwave around the world. But this is good. Keep up the questions, because I like those, and it makes me a better guide as we go through.
So there was a field of antennas out here at one time. So I remember I could see that sometimes, I think.
Yes.
On the highway.
Yeah, we were a square mile.
Yeah.
Actually, where the soccer field is, and if you've gone to the Voice of America shopping center where there's Target and all that other, that was all part of our antenna field at one point in time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, well thank you. We'll get the video started and I'll be right back afterwards.
Thank you.
The voice of radio takes our imagination to faraway places, transforms our mood with music, and brings us news and information. And radio does it without wires, without borders, almost magically, on electromagnetic waves transmitted invisibly through the air. For more than 100 years, radio has saved lives at sea, gathered families together,
Get everything shipshape.
admitted sports fans to their favorite game, warned of impending danger, sent the truth into captive nations, and hope to the oppressed. Since 1942, Voice of America has broadcast the truth to millions trapped in fascist, communist, and other totalitarian regimes. Known to many as the official voice of the United States, the Voice of America is a grand testimony to radio with its miraculous power that opens hearts, leaps all boundaries, and doesn't turn back at closed doors.
Yes, this is the Voice of America, and the voice is still heard.
A building located in a farm field just north of Cincinnati became home to some of America's most important technological innovations and political history. This is a story and a building worth preserving. Until wireless, people received news and entertainment largely via the written word. And then, shortly into the 20th century, crystal sets, shortwave and AM radio connected people to the rest of the world in real time. Greater Cincinnati has played a significant role in the history of wireless communication due to the vision, creativity, and ingenuity of its people. People like Powell Crosley Jr., whose company built low-cost radios for the common man and created increasingly more powerful radio stations with innovative programming. By the end of the 30s, Cincinnati radio was originating over 30 hours of programming for the national networks, equaling New York, LA, and Chicago in program development. Cincinnati's roster of radio talent also rivaled the national radio networks, and many successful stars launched their careers on Cincinnati's airwaves. At that time, most AM radios had 1 or 2 shortwave bands that allowed radio signals to be heard over a very long distance. However, only 13 shortwave stations operated in the United States. By comparison, Germany had 68 shortwave stations, and Japan broadcast from 42. As Germany and Japan waged war in Europe and Asia, they used shortwave to blast their relentless message of racism, arrogance, and hate. With the fall of France to the Nazis in 1940, American officials realized that a blitzkrieg of misinformation was as effective as tanks in conquering a country. When America was attacked at Pearl Harbor, correcting the U.S. shortwave deficiency became an urgent strategic priority, articulated by FDR himself. Roosevelt created the Office of War Information, which included official American broadcast communication at home and overseas. The most powerful shortwave station in the Western Hemisphere, Crosley Broadcasting's WLWO, O for overseas, began broadcasting in German, Spanish, and Italian. WLWO broadcasters like Austrian-born Robert Bauer, who had narrowly escaped the Nazis, gave the Third Reich a dose of its own medicine when he precisely mimicked the Führer's speech. The effectiveness of these broadcasts was confirmed when the Führer himself referred to those Cincinnati liars. Next, President Roosevelt summoned the bigwigs of broadcasting to Washington for an emergency meeting to see who could build a super shortwave transmitter in the shortest amount of time. Cincinnati's Crosley Broadcasting was there because of its expertise with superpower transmitters and shortwave broadcasts. During a break in the meeting, Crosley President James Schaus called Chief Engineer R.J. Rockwell and asked if he could build 200 kilowatt shortwave transmitters. Rockwell's response? I don't know, but I will sure give it a hell of a try.
Schaus came back with a very simple one-page contract. We were to construct 6 200,000 watt transmitters, shortwave, 24 high-efficiency antennas to reach Europe, North, Central, South Africa, and East and Western South America. This is an unusual situation because 200,000 watt transmitters had never been built before.
While the Bethany station was under construction, WLWO and other American-based shortwave stations carried the first words of the new Voice of America.
This is a voice speaking from America.
From the beginning, they rejected the idea of propaganda, believing that truthful information coming from the United States, with unmistakable American sincerity, would be most effective to the American effort. It was the Voice of America broadcasting the truth into the heart of occupied Europe that helped hasten the end of World War II. Technology developed by the military during the war burst onto the American scene afterward. Television took wireless communications to a whole new level. Cincinnati retained its stature as a broadcasting powerhouse, home to 3 major media conglomerates, Crosley Avco, Taft Communications, and Scripps Howard. While the post-war years saw TV going into more homes in the States, radio broadcasting from VOA was going into more homes around the world, in more languages than ever before, reaching a high of 47 different languages. Through the ensuing decades, with the Iron and Bamboo Curtains, through the Korean conflict and the war in Vietnam, Voice of America continued to broadcast news and words of encouragement from the Bethany relay station to millions around the world. Tyrannical rulers, dictators, and despots did not want the Voice of America message heard. Still, many risked their livelihoods, homes, even their lives, to listen to VOA broadcasts. VOA's ability to communicate ideas, ideals, and truthful information remains an important part of American foreign policy. Though the fight is still waged with words of truth, VOA now delivers them via FM, satellite, and cellular. The federal government decommissioned VOA's Bethany station. Bethany beamed its final broadcast on November 14, 1995. The landmark towers that sent the truth around the world for over 5 decades came down soon after. Yet the building still stands as a testimony to the engineers and managers of Bethany Station who accomplished something that had never been done before in a span of time no one thought possible at a pivotal moment in world history. VOA's Bethany Station is a tale of great engineering prowess and determination set against the human drama of totalitarianism versus freedom. This is a thrilling story, worth preserving, an adventure rich with patriotism, geopolitical intrigue, wartime strategy, incredible feats of engineering, and good old Yankee ingenuity. Combine the legacy of Voice of America with Gray's history of wireless collection and the compelling heritage of Cincinnati broadcasting, and you have a wealth of pioneering technology innovative entertainment, and other material that must live on. It is the story of America's voice.
It's been a while since I've seen the video. It used to end with Yankee Doodle Dandy, and our broadcast used to end with Yankee Doodle Dandy so that people would not be confused with what the British were doing at BBC. So this addressed your question a little bit. We'll go into more detail during the tour about specifically why this was here. So please keep that in mind and make sure that I address that. So does anybody have any questions from what you've seen in the video right now before we get started?
And the reason for not Yankee Doodle Dandy, I already know, I think.
Oh, no, we used to end with it.
Yeah, but why don't they do it anymore?
We just shorten the video so that
Oh, okay.
it's just a little trivia thing.
Oh, okay.
So after this start, the broadcasting started, like during World War II, like people had their radios. So is there a certain frequency they would turn to, or how did that work with, like, if I'm in Germany or if I'm in England where I'm at, how do I tune into that station?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and we'll get into that as we control the control room, because that's based on where the ionization layer is, where they could and could not broadcast, and people who got our signals would know where to look for us and where to get us, and then as they were being jammed, they knew how to kind of move up and down the dial to bring us back. So we'll get into that in the control room. That's excellent questions. You guys are spot on. So let's go ahead and we'll get started with the rest of the tour.
The only ship ever deployed was the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Curtis. For 12 years.
It's this Larry Smith puppets. We've got Batty Hattie from Cincinnati in the middle. In the interest of time, we're going to bypass this and go straight into the VOA story, but this hallway is what we have for people to kind of explore and do some things on their own. And then we can add color and add some stories to it. But we're going to get started right over here. All right, you guys are visiting the museum, and we're starting off with something that's not a museum piece. This is known as the Radio Garden. It's an application that you can download on a smartphone, and what it does, all these bright lights that you see around the world are internet radio stations communicating, sharing news, sharing messages, sharing music. You can actually hit a dot, and it'll come up and tell you what radio station it is, but I like to spin the world. So you see all the bright lights around the world?
Yes.
Until you get to some places in Africa.
No.
Until you get over here to the Soviet Union, to China, to North Korea, there's not a lot of bright light. There's not a lot of information that's being freely conveyed to these people. This is a reason why VOA still continues today to spread messages and to spread awareness so that we can give information to these people here.
Okay.
So now we'll step into the control room. And if you could gather around this picture, that would be wonderful.
Give a step.
Greg, do you work here?
No, I'm a volunteer. Everybody here is a volunteer, and we only have one paid professional, our executive director. The entire place was built by volunteers. Well, the museum exhibits were built by volunteers. And we're open on the weekends with volunteers coming through doing tours. So please step in, and if you don't mind, I'd like everybody to kind of see that picture right behind you all. So where you're standing now is what we refer to as our modernized control room. This was built in the mid-60s. When the building was first operational, that where the amateur radio room is was the original control room. So the original control room was back here. You guys are standing where that gentleman's sitting. We've got a drop ceiling now, but right above there was a huge balcony. So our entrance had steps that went up to the balcony, and where you're standing now, there would have been 3 200,000 transmitters on that side, 3 on that side, wires interconnecting them all over, controls, making things happen. And you would look down from that balcony, and you'd be standing over what was known as the Cathedral of Radio, because it was the most powerful radio transmitter in the world. So if I can direct your attention over there, I'm sorry to have to keep moving everybody. This is the reason why we got started. This is our Cincinnati Liars exhibit. That radio is a German radio. Now, the German economics was based on socialism. The Nazi government kind of picked which businesses were going to win and partner with them, and they developed things for the people. So you've got the Volkswagen, which was the people's car. This is called the Volksempfänger, which is known as the people's radio. It was mass produced at a low price, given to the people. If you look at the radio dial, you'll see numbers like are traditional, but you also see words. Those words are German cities, so that wherever you lived, you would tune it to the closest German city to pick up the propaganda. Now, if I can direct your attention the other direction, this radio over here is why the Voice of America kept going after World War II ended. This was manufactured by Russia. The communist government is a monetary system based on socialism, except there is no other business. They're the business. They control everything. This radio was manufactured specifically to block the signals coming from this building. This came to us from someone who immigrated from the Ukraine, and the story was, in every city, in every village, in every town, there was always that person that liked to tinker with electronics. So you took your government-issued radio, the person who would tinker with electronics, they'd adjust it so you get the Voice of America broadcast. You would come back and you would listen to the broadcast on the appropriate channel at the appropriate time, underneath a blanket or in a secured room, and the next day you did not talk about what you heard.
Wow.
Everybody did this. Everybody knew everybody did this, but nobody said a word, because if you mentioned what you heard to the wrong person, you were sent to jail, to Siberia, imprisoned or whatnot. That still occurs today. We've got a little thing about a boat captain that was caught listening to non-authorized broadcast by North Korea and was sent to jail. So that still happens.
Wow.
Does anybody have any questions with what we've seen here? All right, so if I can get you to head into the main body, the control room, we'll continue on.
Oh my goodness, look at that. Holy cow. May I take a picture?
Yeah, oh yeah, I should have told you.
Thank you.
Feel free to take pictures, videos, document this any way you'd like. And again, thank you for coming out, because it's word of mouth, it's your experience that helps us all.
Do you get students?
We are trying to outreach to students because of the technology. You kind of have to have an understanding of the Cold War and World War II, so younger.
Since they don't teach that in school anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, older students we get by, and the part that we didn't go through, we've got a radio STEM lab that's designed for young people, and we've got what's known as a Foley room, and we can take you there after the tour's over to show you that, because it's really cool.
They need to know the little,
They do, and we
the
keep,
older ones, not the little ones.
and we keep the story alive. So, speaking of stories, the Voice of America, the original intent was to broadcast news, tell the truth, let the world decide. You got that from the video. As it proved successful, they were doing other programming. One of the programmings they did was something known as special English. So they took words that had one source of meaning. So if I throw the word at you, cool, what do you think of?
Cold.
Cold. Anybody think of something different?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Exactly.
It's neat.
It's neat. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Even neat's got two meanings. Neat can be cool or neat can be tidy. So words like that were not used in Voice of America. They brought it down, or the special English, they brought it down to 1,500 words. They would speak it very slowly, and they would speak in the language and then in English so that people could learn. So this is a Polish Voice of America special English
This
program.
is the Voice of America. The following newscast is in English and Polish.
Tu Głos Ameryki z Waszyngtonu. Podajemy dziennik w wersji angielskiej i polskiej.
Here are the day's headlines.
Na wstępie skrót wiadomości.
The U.S. House of Representatives.
So you get the idea. They just kind of go back and forth and allow people to pick up English. The other thing that happened is we would broadcast cultural programs. I'm having a hard time talking today. So jazz is a uniquely American phenomenon of music. It was created here. But all the great jazz clubs in Europe are from Voice of America broadcasts. We would do that. We've got a little display here as our homage to our jazz background.
Oh, wow.
So what we have here, this was not originally part of our control room. This came to us from Voice of America in Washington, D.C. This is a mixing board. The way it operated, and this kind of goes to your question originally as well, all the content was created in Washington, D.C. that we broadcast. Nothing was developed here. So we come, and this mixing board was used in the 90s to create the broadcasts that we would send out around the world. It would come here over the telephone lines. And then we would pick it up. These behind you is what got the information and stored it and kept it prepared and ready for our broadcast. So we're actually known as the Bethany Station. Did anybody grow up around here?
I lived here from 70 on.
Are you familiar with Bethany, Ohio?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bethany, Ohio, did you guys take 71 or 75 from Otterbein? Oh, you came the back roads, okay. But if you go up 71, right around where Children's Hospital is,
Yeah.
right behind that is a community known as Bethany, Ohio. Back in the 1940s, when we got started, that was the closest telephone switchboard operator. You could not communicate to anybody directly over the phone, so Washington, D.C. would call a switchboard operator in Bethany, Ohio, and ask to be connected to our building, and that's how we got our information.
Wow.
So does anybody have any questions so far? Yeah.
When you broadcasted from here, did you have kind of a relay station?
We did, and that, you guys are, we're gonna move on to that next in a couple minutes, so I feel bad I'm telling you to hold on to your questions.
Yeah,
but
you're one.
They're really good.
We're one. Even though we might have gray hair, we're one step ahead of you.
You are. So one of the things before we leave this part of the control room is that the phone lines came in here. Right behind you, that's kind of lit up, is the monitoring station. That would be what the engineers looked at to make sure that what was going out to the world was at the right levels and was strong enough. And then off to your right below those flags is one of the transmitters that would send it out to the rest of the world. And we'll go back in that in more detail. This building was designed to pull power from Cincinnati, Ohio, as well as Dayton, Ohio, depending on what the power needs were. We used as much electricity as a small town of maybe about 15,000 residents each day coming through here.
Wow.
So we'll move over here, we'll get into the relay station questions.
That's the relay. Oh, look at that. Yeah. That's
Everything
propaganda.
that was done here was done through shortwave. The interesting thing about shortwave, oh yeah, please feel free to have a seat. This is one of the few areas where we can sit and talk a little bit. You'll learn more about how shortwave radio operates, and I'm more of a historian, storyteller, not a radio guy. But shortwave is actually the longest radio wave, and it leaves its source in a straight line. So the Earth is round, that makes it a little difficult. But what happens is, we've got this thing around the Earth called the ionization layer, and what that does is that protects us from the sun's radiation, solar radiation burning everything up, but it also allows shortwave radios to bounce off of it. So when the ionization layer is here, Voice of America, we're bouncing off of it, we can broadcast to Germany, but you can see we're missing Russia. So we have to make sure that we're on our antennas that broadcast to Germany because they can hear us, and we're not on our antennas that broadcast to Russia because we're wasting time, they can't pick us up. As the ionization layer changes, now you see that we can no longer broadcast to Germany, but we are able to broadcast to Russia, so we have to go and switch to the appropriate antennas. So that's kind of the concept. It bounces up and down around the Earth to its destination based on what the ionization layer let us do. And the guys in the amateur radio room can give you more details on that. What we have in this display is different types of radio antennas. This very first antenna just looks like a bar going straight up. That's known as an omnidirectional antenna. It allows sound to go out of it 360 degrees. You can't control it. The example of that are those cell phone antennas that you see. You don't want to restrict the direction of the sound. You want it to go everywhere so all the antennas can pick it up, or all the radios can pick it up. As you keep going and put antennas on the stands, then you can direct the sound. We had two types of antennas here, rhombics, which are diamond shaped, and antenna curtains, which is basically two antennas put back together. So the way they operated is they hook up to these towers. I used to think these were the antennas. They're not. They're just towers that hold it up. The wires are the actual antenna.
Interesting.
This one is aimed at Europe. This one would be aimed at Africa. So with this particular situation, sound travels 2 directions from this antenna. But we don't want sound to go this way. We want all the sound to go to Europe. So basically you construct a second antenna behind it, known as a radio curtain. And this isn't specific, this is just general. But what happens is sound travels half a wavelength, meets the resistance of the antenna curtain, bounces back half a wavelength to the original source. The process, it completes an entire wavelength, which means it sends radio signals more powerfully in the direction you want it to go. The way the rhombics work is they're kind of strung up so that it ends out of one direction of the antenna. So this is not to scale, but this just gives you an idea of what it looks like. So when we were operational, the yellow phone lines are coming into the building, and the green is the sound coming from the control room, the transmitters, going to what's known as the switching matrix, and then out to all the antennas. And you can see the switching matrix out there. The switching matrix has got 244 levers on there. It's basically levers that you push up and down, and it makes connections so you can go north, south, east, west on the property. So everything travels out here, and then if we're broadcasting in South America, it comes along here and goes out that way. If we're broadcasting to Africa, you flip the switches and it goes out to that antenna. So again, the frequencies that we're broadcast are kind of determined by where we're going, and the people, the audience knew what they were. Does anybody have any questions?
Somebody had to be a genius to figure all that out.
Well, actually, right behind you, and I
Is
apologize,
it
I feel like
genius?
every time I point, you saw him in the video. This gentleman, his name is Clyde Hanley, and he was the engineer that worked for the Crosley Company. He used that map right above. That map shows how radio waves flow around the earth with a little red dot, Cincinnati in the middle. So with that map and a slide rule, he figured out the location for all the antennas that are on the property. No computers involved.
Really? He used it.
His brain, the map, his knowledge of radio. A lot of people think you had to be really smart to work here. You did, but we also had people who were really skilled. Because remember, these are antennas, these are wires, there's a lot of energy. These were very high. The weather around here could snap the antennas between wind and sleet. You had to have people that could scale these things, deal with heavy equipment, deal with electricity, and do antennas. So we had all kinds of people with all kinds of skills working.
The ionization layer, is that stable or does it fluctuate?
It's a very good question, and the people, the REM radio operators could better answer that. It does fluctuate because it moves, but it's relatively stable because it stays around the earth, which kind of doesn't sound like an answer, but they'll be able to answer that much better.
That's good enough.
Okay, well, thank you.
For me.
So there was a question about the relay stations. What we have here in this map, and it's not to scale to any particular time period, but all these lights represent relay stations. This is us here, and anything that's red is no longer operational. Any tag that's green is operational. So the Voice of America does have one shortwave radio operating, and that's in Greenville, North Carolina.
Really?
So they used to have 2 more out in California. They're no longer operating, and we're no longer operating. If you notice the distance between our back door and the switching matrix, the reason why that's so great is because they didn't know if this was going to work out. And if it did work out, they were going to expand and make it bigger. So they wanted to have room to grow towards the switching matrix. What ended up happening was they put it in different locations. So they built a building like us, or 2 buildings like us, out in California, and then another one out in Greenville. So that's why there's such a great distance. Now, I'm going to give you all a little quiz real quick. What do you notice about the Earth that there's more of than anything else? Water. So under the Truman administration, they thought, why do we have all these land-based relay stations? Let's put all the equipment on a boat. So they got a battleship, and they put in all the tubes, all the glass tubes, all the radio equipment, all the sensitive equipment on a battleship. Because the goal was to sail it through international water and park outside of the coast of where we're going to target, where we're going to broadcast. What do you think happened when the battleship fired its gun?
All the troops surrounded.
Correct. So they came up with an alternate plan, which was to put it on a Coast Guard vessel, and it was known as the USS Courier. We've got a model of it over here. That was the largest radio transmitter in the world at its time, between 52 and 64. It was not inland. It ended up being parked in the Mediterranean off the island of Rhodes in the country of Greece. So our whole back wall is kind of a walking display dedicated to those sailors and radio operators that did Voice of America from the Rhodes.
Wow.
We were so powerful with our broadcast here that if we were going in a direction that a farmer was plowing, we'd fry up the tractor and they would not be able to.
Oh, my.
So have you guys heard about the Geek Squad that Best Buy has? If you have computer problems, there's a little group that would go and help residents tune their fences so they wouldn't pick up our broadcast.
Oh, really?
Oh, my goodness.
Help fix the tractors and things like that. So we've got some fun little stories I can share with you later if there's time and you'd
You
like.
just wonder what's going through your body, too, right?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question, because back when these guys were CROS employees, when they first got started, there wasn't OSHA, and nobody knew the impact of all this on their body. We had, at one point in time, 6 200,000 watt transmitters sending all their energy to the switching matrix. So I'm told that you were out there 8 minutes flipping whatever switches you needed, and if you didn't get it done, you were back in the building and someone else took over for you, because they didn't want people exposed to all that energy for that long. When the government took over, you became a government employee, OSHA doesn't really apply to what the government does. So there's not been any real valid study that I'm aware of that really shows what this type of power does to the human people.
Wow.
All right, very good questions. We'll keep going this way. Oh, you've all been asking very good questions.
Well, I was a first grade teacher, and that's way beyond me.
I'm not sure what your schedule is, so I'm just gonna do basically a standard
We aren't
tour.
either.
And, you know,
The
afterwards,
bus will wait for us.
okay. I'll answer questions and take you through anything you'd like. If you wanna come through, I guess standing there
Okay.
gives you a good idea. So this is our last remaining transmitter. This is a Collins transmitter. Again, I'm not a radio person, but the way this operates is it uses crystals, little tiny crystals that pick up radio signals and they vibrate. This magnifies and amplifies the vibration of the crystals. Inside here are where the crystals are. So this machine just jacks up all the power, all the energy to send it out so that we can broadcast around the world. This came from the 60s. This was known as Bay 6. It's built by the Collins Corporation. There were only 10 of them made. 3 were here, 1 here in each of those bays, and then 6 were out in California, 3 in each of those stations, and the Collins Corporation kept 1 for themselves. There are only 2 left in the world. This is one of them, and the other one is in a radio museum in Rochester. When the buildings got decommissioned, everything got torn apart, this all went to scrap. So what you're seeing here is something that's very unique.
Oh, absolutely.
These, again, I'm not a radio person, but when you're dealing with high energy and all these radio waves, it sometimes gets out of tune. So you'd have to do that with the radio sometime, tune it back up. This would take 8 seconds to tune and get back to the way it should be, where the old Crosleys that we started off with would take up to 8 minutes to tune. Where you're standing now would have been 110 degrees when we were operational. So we talked about early on that we used enough energy as a 15,000 village or community. Excuse me, 80% of the energy we used went out of the building as communication. The other 20% was heat. So this building was not heated unless the outside temperature dropped below 32 degrees. There was that much heat coming off these things.
Wow.
Okay.
That was a little struggle for the museum because this was never built to be a museum. So prior to getting a grant from the state of Ohio, there were areas that were very cold as we were going through tours because they didn't really have to rely on that.
And now you know the computers now have to be cool.
Yeah, these had to be cooled, and that's, this is incredible. We're gonna go see kind of how how these got cooled, just like the computers. So if you wanna follow me and come in here.
Oh, if we're not good, we get locked in?
Yeah, no, this is a really sensitive area. Everything's
Where do
grounded.
you want us to go?
I'm sorry, I'll just walk and you
Yeah,
can
I'll
follow
follow
me.
you. That way I know I won't be stuck back here.
Oh, you won't. It seems like everything's in a big circle in here.
Oh my gracious.
So if you could, if you look, this in the middle here is a tube, it's got a black top. That was the type of tube that was used by this transmitter to broadcast. It was made especially for this, so this wasn't a glass tube, but that's what it was. So if everybody can kind of come in here where I am. You guys are making this tour easy. You're right on top of everything we need to cover. So this is kind of the innards of the transmitter. We were at the face. This is where all the tubes were, where the action happened. We've got the wiring. Inside here would have been that tube inverted. So yeah, and there would have been one here, kind of all over where we are. If you look up here, there was a vent. So the room behind us had electricity, but it also had a big air compressor that would pull outside air through the building, through here, and then go up. There's a second story above us. So that was one of the ways it got cooled, through the air. The other way it got cooled is the building is vented. So we could open up slots and have heat just release naturally. The third way these were cooled was steam. It was 110 degrees in here, very hot.
Oh.
So what happened is when you guys came in, you saw that big tower in the middle of the building. At the top of the tower, it's 4 stories. The very top of it was a guard tower. Some people said there were machine gun nests up there. That's a rumor. There were armed guards, but they were more of a security capacity, not a machine gun nest. But the second and third story of that is a big, huge water tank. So this roof was designed to capture rainwater. The rainwater would drain to a cistern that's located right underneath the American flag out front. And then we would pump it up and it would be stored in the cistern as well as that water tank. It would use gravity to go into the basement. We had a huge boiler in the basement that would basically create distilled water, get rid of the metals that are naturally in water, get rid of the impurities, because you don't want to send metal through here with all the electrical stuff going on. So it would come here as steam, and then we had a condenser across the top that would capture the steam. As that cooled into water, it would come back down, cool again on its way to the basement, and the cycle just kind of kept perpetuating. So this building was built in 1944. They didn't have green buildings, but the way the Crosley Corporation operated was very efficient, and they really used things. So again, 80% of the energy was used properly, 20% was waste. They did everything they could to keep costs down and to be as effective as possible.
Wow.
So if you notice, this is even grounded in here with the copper all around us. The building has got copper wiring on the outside, 50 feet in every direction, all underground to keep it grounded as well.
Genius.
Do you guys have any questions? All right, so unfortunately, we have to go back out through the gate that we came in.
Water just reminds me though, I lived on a farm, we had a cistern.
Oh.
When it rained, we got it.
Yeah, it's,
Exactly like you guys did.
yeah.
Only we did it for our household.
Right, well, the similar concept, just
Yeah.
on a larger scale, but you're
Yes.
taking advantage of what nature's offering.
Absolutely.
And then if everybody would, just go right in front of this transmitter that
Tricky,
says
aren't you?
WLWO.
You went the other way. Hey.
We took the shortcut.
All right. Oh,
Yeah, we, certainly.
And you gotta be quick.
all right, let's lock this back up. So in the video, you saw that we had to counteract the Nazi propaganda
Yes.
as soon as the war effort began. This building took 1 year to be built, and it didn't open until 44. We got involved in World War II in 42. So, going back to why is this here? It's because of the Crosley Corporation, the Crosley brothers.
Okay.
There's Powell and Lewis Crosley. They're both engineers, But Pal was more of a marketing guy. He was a very forward thinker. His brother Lewis was more of a practical person. In fact, was trained to be part of the Army Corps of Engineers back during World War I. So the two of them created a company where they would manufacture things that the rich had, but at a price point that the middle class and upper lower class could afford to buy. They were involved in automobile, kitchen appliances, refrigerations, dishwashers, all kinds of stuff. They were located right down the street. As you came in, you probably went right by that big WLW tower. I believe it's called a Blau Knox Tower. WLW 700 broadcasts out of that today. That's their antenna. Across the street, where there's a BW3 and Aero Beverage, used to be what's known as Everybody's Farm. They own that, and they would broadcast hay rides, hoedowns, and country whatever stuff from there. It was a working, fun farm. When the government needed somebody, they already were here. They bought this property, and then we used this transmitter to broadcast for the first 2 years. After we were done, this transmitter went back to use for WLW right down the road. And what we're finding out now is there was an employee at WLW who was actually a spy for the American government. Everybody thought this person was a co-worker, but they would use this radio to broadcast secret messages and secret spy codes to our spy network around the world. We're just now discovering, with the help of his granddaughter, what was going on because of the Freedom of Information Act. It's been over 50 years, so now some of this can come out. So I've gotten questions before you. Yeah, so I've gotten questions, do we, the Voice of America, broadcast secret messages? We did not. We stuck with the truth and news, but right down the street, the government was using this transmitter.
So they were, they were kind of like an auditor, kind of overseeing you folks to a certain degree.
Yeah, there was government oversight, but we tried to stay clear to the mission and did not get involved in any of that espionage stuff.
So the guy who was doing that, was this through some kind of code, or was it just, I mean...
Yeah, I don't know the specifics, but it would be, you'd hear like a sound and maybe a phrase that didn't sound quite right in English. The mad cat ate a tree or something like that. It would teach you. But that's the type of stuff it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we could find shortwaves in a lot of places. And I would listen with my cousins to broadcasts from all over the world. But you don't find radios with shortwave on them anymore.
You don't.
I don't even know if they make them.
It's a rare talent. A lot of that is going on with the ham radio. People have moved to the internet. Your phone actually has 5 different radios in it to operate. So as technology advances, you just kind of change to a different medium.
But as a final to that, do they still use shortwave for overseas broadcasts?
They do. In North Carolina, we broadcast into Cuba and some other areas using shortwave. It's not as prevalent as it used to be, but it's still being done.
And they have the receivers there, which
we
don't have.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so if I can get everybody to kind of come this direction. This room that you're in now is known as the Crosley Radio Room. So we talked about the Crosley Company doing everything but radio. What happened was, by the 1920s, Powell Crosley was a very rich individual due to what his company was doing. His son wanted the latest, coolest toy. So radio, as we know it, started in the 1920s. It's only been around for about 100 years. They went to a shop where you could buy a radio, and the radio was $100 in 1920s money.
That's a lot
That would be the
of money.
equivalent of $1,200 in today's currency.
Just for a little radio.
Powell Crosley, due to his nature, said, no, we can make it better and cheaper ourselves. He and his son started tinkering, and this is what they came up with right over here. It's known as the Crosley Pup.
Okay.
And
I remember something like that.
this retailed for $10 as opposed to $100.
Wow.
The reason being is there's 2 ways you could make radios back at that time. The expensive way was a really good radio. You had to put a lot of tubes in here. These tubes were patented because of the way they were vacuum sealed and everything in them. They were very expensive. The more tubes you put in a radio, the better the tube is. You can get far away, distant signals and hear weak things and tune it in, but you're paying a lot of money for all those tubes.
That's right.
You put one tube in here, you only hear the strongest signal possible.
Oh, okay.
So that's another reason why we were located here. That antenna down the street was used by the Crosley Corporation to put out as much power, as big a signal as they possibly could. They got that radio station, or that antenna, up to 500,000 watts. 2/3 of the United States and a large part of Canada would hear the farm broadcast coming out of everybody's farm.
Really? Wow.
The government got involved and said, that's too powerful. We were actually blocking radio signals from stations in New York that weren't as strong as we were. So the government mandated radio stations cannot be more than 50,000 watts or less. But when the government needed people who could broadcast powerful signals in the 1940s, the engineers here had already done it right down the road, which is the second reason why this building's here.
That's right. They used us. Okay.
Because they called WLW the nation station.
That's why. That's exactly why, because when it was 500,000
Nation
watts,
station.
The nations?
because the nation could hear it when it was 500,000 watts. Canada actually bought some property in Mason and put up radio curtains to block the transmission because we were interfering with what they were trying to develop.
Oh, my.
So speaking of the word cool, we're parked right in front of what's probably the coolest thing in the museum. This is known as the proximity fuse. It's the great-grandparent to the smart weapons we use today. This is not a Crosley invention. This came from inventors and engineers in England. England was getting bombed, so you fire your rockets, your missiles up to planes, you hit the plane, good for you. You miss the plane, what happens?
The bomb comes down and, destroys
Right.
the art.
So their idea was to do something similar to what bats had, sending out like a signal and getting it back to judge how close you are to a target. They could not figure out how to keep all the sensitive glass components from shattering due to the G-forces being fired out of the cannon. U.S. Navy got involved. They came here, engineers of the Crosley Corporation and the engineering department at the University of Cincinnati figured out how to make this work. The Navy took that information back, spread it out across the country to the war efforts, but 28% of all proximity fuses used in World War II were built here in Cincinnati. They were built primarily by women because women naturally have smaller hands than men, and women are more dexterous. They can use their fingers and manipulate things better than men. So this was parsed out, built by women, put together at the very last step, dropped into a secret elevator, put on a conveyor belt going underneath the road from the Crosley factory, and it popped up at a dairy processing plant across the street. They packaged them up in milk cartons and put on a milk truck, and then drove them out to Lincoln Airport, which was our international airport at the
That's
time.
all secretive.
All secretive.
All
They were
secretive.
so concerned about Nazi infiltrators.
That's right. Yep.
That's cool.
So, and that uses radio waves to judge the distance before it explodes.
Interesting. Wow.
So does anybody have any questions so far?
Was the dairy farm the one off of Tylersville?
No. Their factory is still down. It's down on Arlington Street. If you head towards downtown Cincinnati, right after 74, you'll see this cream-colored building that's got graffiti on it. And if you look, there looks like an old Tombstone radio at the top.
Huh. I don't know that one.
You'll see it.
Okay.
Oh. So I'd like to direct your attention over here. This is something that's kind of cool too. If you notice this printout, what type of technology does it look like? And this was made in the 1930s. This was printed out in the 1930s. It's typing kind of like a fax machine. This was not a Crosley invention, but it came to Crosley to try and make it profitable. I believe this was called the Redeo.
Oh, it's almost like radio.
It's exactly like radio. When the Titanic sunk, radio stations had to operate 24/7. So you're broadcasting at night. You go to bed, Crosley Company had something set up on that tower where you could buy this device and it would print out what was going and being broadcast overnight, like a telegraph type of thing. So you could have something more current than the newspaper being dropped on your doorstep. Because he realized he was not only competing with other radio stations, he was competing with the press.
Oh, yes.
So you're doing sound through the air. You're able to do words through the air. Well, what's the next thing you put through the air? Pictures.
Oh, yeah, TV.
TV. So they went into the TV business, and WLWT, Channel 5 locally, started off as a Crosley TV station. And the thing to remember with radio, with television, is before you had the machines, there was no need for a radio station. So all the original radio stations were designed to sell radios. All the original TV shows were designed to sell TVs. But then you had to put content on there to get people interested. Crosley, again, being thrifty, economical, got a lot of homegrown talent. You kind of saw that in the video. Doris Day, the Mills Brothers, the Ink Spots, came all locally. And during the 20s and 30s, Cincinnati was an entertainment mecca on par with New York and LA.
Greg,
Yes.
this is a comment on this. When I was in the Navy, I was in intelligence.
Oh.
And we communicated, long before the days of the internet, we communicated with ticker tape.
Okay.
So it was a similar
Very similar.
arrangement, because obviously it was radio waves coming in that activated the machines. And then it was ticker tape, and then we read it, and it was encrypted, that then would be disseminated to where it needed to go.
I'm gonna use that story, the ticker tape, because that's
Yeah.
exactly the same
Same
type of
thing.
process. They did have trouble with
Same
it.
thing with me with computers. They put me in a back room and I typed on a computer numbers and names, but it put holes
In the cards?
In the cards.
Yes,
And then-
yeah.
then
I used to build computer rooms, so I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, so it's the same way, same that was only with computers.
Yes.
When they first came out. How about that?
The holes punched.
Yeah, the holes punched. You remember those?
I do.
Oh,
Brittany
okay.
does.
Okay.
I had cards.
I had cards. Yeah, put the cards in there and then they took it and then they read them later.
Some of the way Crosley would save money is components. You got your radio and your phonograph all in one unit. Instead of buying separate pieces, you got it together in one. This is an early example from 1949. It's got a television, a radio, and a phonograph all in the same unit.
Oh, that was a Z thing, man.
Yeah.
You had it. I remember going over to my next door neighbors to see,
Did you grow up in Cincinnati?
whatchamacallit.
I did not. I grew up in Dayton.
Okay, I'm waiting for you to talk about a very prominent lady that was on that.
I can do that after the tour.
I know you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. But speaking of prominent ladies, this is a room that's dedicated to other stuff that Crosley did. And I'll get to the prominent lady part in a second. This is known as an icy ball. Back before the 1940s, most of America did not have electricity in their home. What you could buy this icy ball from Crosley. There was a mixture of ammonia and water over here. You would heat it up, and the chemical reaction caused this to freeze for 24 hours. So you had an ice chest within your home. This technology, I'm told, is still being used in RVs today.
Really?
But once homes got electric, Crosley moved into making refrigerators as we know them. But there's something unique about this refrigerator called the Crosley Shelvador. It's got two things that refrigerators at the same time in the 1930s. It's got a radio. So this was the original smart appliance. You hear about smart appliance now. He's doing smart appliances back in the 1930s.
Oh my gracious.
There's something else, though, that's unique about this. Does anybody want to guess what the second feature is? Shelves in the door.
Oh, okay.
This was not a Crosley invention. This was a woman out in California's invention. She had a husband who was a tinker and inventor, and the two of them came up with this. This would originally have been sealed with foam. She thought it was to keep it cold. She thought it was a huge waste of space. They worked together to do the insulation in this format to make it worthwhile and worthy of being a place for eggs, butter, margarine, etc.
Let me ask you this, and then, because I remember ice being delivered to our house to keep the
Yep,
refrigerator going.
that's all
Is that
part of
sort of
it.
like the ice box?
No, this may not have had an ice box in it, but that's all kind of part of the process.
The process, okay, but this was not this was an electric.
Yeah, this would have been an
Yeah,
electric
okay,
refrigerator, yeah.
Okay.
Which is a very good point. But anyway, they came up with the ideas, they got the patent, they went to Frigidaire. Frigidaire said, no one's interested. Whirlpool, blah, blah, blah. Came to Crosley, and Crosley like, you got a pretty good idea. He wanted $15,000 for everything, patent, blueprints. Crosby said, no, that's a little too much. What if I give you $5,000 and a quarter for every unit sold in the future?
Oh, okay.
What do you think the inventor took?
Oh, lots of money.
He wanted the money. He wanted the money
He
up
wanted
front.
the money.
So they settled, I believe, around $10,000.
No,
But
he could have.
Crosley got the patent. So if you wanted a refrigerator with shelves in the door up until the mid-50s, you had to buy a Crosley.
Wow.
He sold 1 million of these in the first 2 years, so that inventor could have been relatively wealthy had they chose to fund it long term.
Perpetuity.
Yeah.
You could have gone on and on a boo-boo on him.
So we're going to end our tour with something that kind of ended the Crosley empire. One of the things that Crosley would do is he'd get in at the beginning and sell when it got high and get out of it. So he got out of radios early on, he got out of TVs early on. He loved automobiles. This was manufactured in 1948, is when he started making these. These are known as the Crosley Hot Shots. This is the very first example of an American-made two-seat sports roadster at an affordable price.
Oh, my.
And nobody bought it.
Huh?
Exactly. So do you get, why is a very good question. So think of the time period. He started making these in 48. World War II had just ended in 45. The GIs were coming home in 46. They were moving out to the suburbs. They were starting families. Nobody wanted a two-seater. They wanted something their family could drive in, a station wagon. Also, it was the beginning of the space age, and people wanted metal. They wanted fins. They wanted big cars.
57 Chevy.
Yeah, a car like this did not become popular with the American attention until the Mazda Miata came out in the 1990s. So this is kind of an example of how far ahead the Crosley Corporation thought about things.
Where were these made?
These were made over in Indiana.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So you all have been really great.
Did it have a price for it? I'm looking.
I don't know what the price point was. It was relatively inexpensive. These are the engines that used to drive it. We had 2 different prototypes. But this is kind of the end of our formal tour. Feel free to walk around, or we could walk over and talk about Ruth Lyons. You guys have been great. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And you're just a volunteer. I know.
What's your last name?
It's Hauser.
Okay. Greg, thank you so much.
Oh, sure. No, thank you. Thanks for coming out from Otterbein.
Are these seats from Crosley Field?
They are.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to make sure I'm cleared out of here for the next group going. But
Okay.
let's-
Where do we have to go?
Let's go back this way.
We'll follow you.
Yeah, we'll talk about Crosley Field out there.
March lot, maybe?
Oh, that's so hard. I'm over here 41 years. I'm from Detroit, so I grew up in the Motor City capital.
I always have lived in the area.
The
Not all.
first night baseball game.
Oh, yeah, that's what I remember. My husband said that. He said,
My husband used to sneak into Ross Crosley.
he did too.
All right, so we got the seats from Crosley Field. Crosley bought that in the 40s to keep the Reds from going away. It was also something that would distinguish his radio station from everybody else, so he would broadcast Reds games. Now, the other thing that's unique about that, and we had a big light by it, Pal Crosley, as the owner of the Reds, did the very first night baseball game. Professional baseball. He realized that people were working during the day and they couldn't come to games during the day. So he put lights in, and that was his claim to fame. Major League Baseball was resistant to it to a degree, and I believe Wrigley Field up in Chicago did not use lights until like the late 80s, 90s or something like that. again, he's always thinking, always trying to improve things.
Such a mind.
Did he, Crosby, have any children that have the brain like he?
You know, I need to do more research on that. He had a son, and I believe he had a daughter. His son died at the Crosley estate in Florida from a bee sting.
Oh.
And Crosley's grandson died during the Korean conflict. And I'm not sure what happened to his daughter. She may be in this area some way, and she might have had some offspring. I don't know. I do need to do some research on
No,
that.
it's too bad because, I mean, man.
Well, I mean, he was,
Brilliant.
but again, I keep saying he, I should say they, because Crosley thought of the idea,
Yeah.
but it was his younger brother, Lewis, who was
Yeah.
more practical,
They
that
worked
could make the
together.
idea happen.
Right.
Yeah, they work together.
Two minds, good.
Yep,
Yeah.
and if you would, just kind of follow me into the ham shack. I'm gonna look for Mark. 'Cause this is our final part of the tour. So here you're gonna learn about how shortwave radio operates and some of those questions you had. Oh, there, about the ionization layer, Mark can answer because he is the expert. And actually before, we talked about, volunteers. Everything you saw, everything was built by volunteers. He is the mastermind behind it and did a lot of the work, a lot of the electrical work, all kinds of stuff. So we would not really be able to be here without the talents of Mark. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought he was gonna talk about Ruth Ryan. Ruth Ryan's.
Oh, he will.
You were gonna talk about Ruth Ryan's, I thought.
After this.
After this, okay, thank you.
Welcome, this is the Westchester Amateur Radio Club, also known as Ham Radio. You've probably heard that name
Yes.
before. And I apologize for my tuxedo today, because this was my day to volunteer, so I didn't know the tour was coming, so this is how I dressed, so.
Well, this is how we dress.
Oh,
We
that's-
feel right at home.
That's fine, thank you. What we're doing in amateur radio today is exactly what VOA did their entire time on the air. And that was to use the shortwave radio bands to get their signal on the other side of the earth. You're familiar with your AM radio that's in your car, and when you start to leave town, you start to lose the signal,
Yeah.
and you have to dial and find a closer station. Those radio stations were always meant to be regional, so this station wouldn't bother
Right,
this
yeah.
station. With shortwave radio, when we transmit, and a couple of our antennas are behind the building here, when we transmit, that signal leaves our antenna and it bounces off of the upper atmosphere. Bounces down to Earth, bounces up again, and that bounce goes literally around the world until it runs out of energy. It's a very hard concept to grasp, but for 100 years, it's worked just fine. To put all that in perspective though with VOA, all these radios that are behind me are shortwave radios. They're, they put out about 100 watts worth of power. What you saw in the back, in the very back, that one Collins transmitter, that was rated at 250,000 watts. And VOA had 6 transmitters. So at any one time, they had 1.5 million watts of transmit power available to get their signal wherever they wanted to get their signal, wherever they wanted to be heard. We can talk to Europe on 100 watts. So, VOA was gonna be heard. They did such a good job at that, that during one of Adolf Hitler's speeches, he referred to this building as the Cincinnati Liars, because he was trying to convince his people, don't listen to what they're saying. Of course, VOA's message was drastically different than what he was telling everyone. But he was upset because he knew where the signal was coming from, but there was nothing he could do about it because we're in the middle of corn country. I like to tell people that if he ever tried an invasion here, he would have had to deal with the local farmers. And that would have been more of a fight than the army. I don't want to be looking at a shotgun. Today, in ham radio, one of the first interesting things, which goes again to talk about our influence around the world, the official language in ham radio is English. So I don't need to know 25 different languages when I'm talking to people around the world. Of course, interpreting their version of English could be challenging at times. And I used to make fun of that until I learned most of them know 4 or 5 languages. So they're probably the ones laughing at me because I'm way behind the curve.
Yeah, we're lucky we just know one.
Actually, we had a visitor yesterday whose wife was from Japan, and she said, if you know 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you know 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you only know 1, you're American.
Amen.
So, quite the dig there, but she was brutally honest. We do a lot of fun things in ham radio. On this map of the world behind me, that purple line is the current path of the International Space Station. Circles the Earth every 90 minutes. We have a tendency to forget there's a whole bunch of astronauts up there. You can't see it during the day, but that purple dot bullseye is right off the coast of Africa. But at night, if it's clear outside, it looks like the brightest star in the sky that happens to move across the horizon. It is possible for a ham radio operator with just a simple handheld radio, if they happen to be on the air, to talk with them. I might have, I'll come back to that. One of our fellas did it a couple months ago. He saw that the pass was about 5 minutes away, so he ran outside with his radio and called them. He called them along with hundreds of other people that are trying to get a hold of him, and the astronaut answered him.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, not too many people can go to work and say, I talked to an astronaut this morning. So, he has bragging rights for quite some time, and we're tired of listening to it. We do some other things in ham radio. We also offer a public service. Because all of the hams are licensed by the FCC, we are considered volunteers. So we can be called upon by police, fire, Red Cross, FEMA, Homeland Security. We don't do what they do, we do the things that they don't have time to do. So if they're overwhelmed with checking houses after a tornado, they would ask us to do that. They would ask us to man radios, have people at the hospital, have people in the field to keep their people up to date on what's happening in the field. Very interesting during the event that happened with the tornadoes and hurricane in Asheville. There was a big ham radio outfit that was in Asheville, and all their equipment got destroyed. There was another club that was in Hickory, North Carolina. They broadcasted straight for 3 weeks. And all they were doing is what we call, they were trading traffic. Someone would call in and say, hey, the bridge is out on so-and-so road. There's families in need in this area. Can you do anything? So they were actually took their equipment into one of the emergency management facilities. So they passed all that information on.
Wow.
So, and the help was, there was no infrastructure that the police were able to use. All the police and fire radios were out in that area. So they relied heavily on the ham operators during that particular event, because we don't rely on any of that technology. Everything we do is my antenna to someone else's antenna. Just like what VOA, it came out of our antenna and it wound up somewhere over in Europe. So we get used for that a lot of times. When we do speak with people around, I gotta back up one. Not only is the official language English, I don't know why I keep forgetting this one. there's two things in ham radio that we don't talk about. We don't talk about politics or religion on the air. And that's because it is a hobby and there's really no place for it. And that's why we're all still good friends still, because we don't get into those discussions and arguments. But, so that keeps things, pretty on the up and up. And that, believe it or not, that holds true around the world. If someone starts spewing something, other guys will just ignore them and go away. When we do speak with people around the world, we'll exchange what we call a QSL card. It is a postcard, has a picture of our building on the front. And on the back, we would write the time and date and the person's name that we spoke with. And in return, we would hope that they would send us one of their cards. We have over 2,000 cards in stock. I'll tell you this because it's a little bit crowded to get people into the hallway, but in the hallway, and I encourage you to look at it on your way out, we have what we call our mini wall of fame. It's postcards, most recent cards from people around the world. For instance, one of the cards is from the research center that's in Antarctica.
Really?
That's a hard one to get because there's not always a ham operator there. And when there is, they're supposed to be doing research, not playing on the radio. So when that person gets on the air, everybody wants to talk to them because they will send them one of their cards. And, but the cards, you'll see by looking at them when you go out, the cards are a reflection of the people that we talk to. Some people's cards have their dogs and their cats' pictures on them. Some of them have pictures of the exotic beach that they're on right now, somewhere in the Caribbean. But there's more to that in that the salt water off of the coast of a lot of these Caribbean places, the salt water is an excellent reflector of the bounce of our radio signals. So if they took their radio with them on vacation, then they could sit on the beach and actually make further contacts than what we might make here in the U.S. So, but one of the most asked questions is, well, what do you talk about? You don't talk about politics or religion. Talking about the weather gets boring, except when you talk to somebody in Alaska. They can tell you really how cold it is outside. And probably, I have two stories that are probably a good description of the people that we talk to. The first fellow was from Poland, and hams like to talk about what kind of equipment they have. And he asked me, he said, well, what do you have at home? And I said, I don't have anything at home. I can come up here and use all this state-of-the-art equipment. And I said, besides that, I can't have a tower or an antenna at home because I live in an HOA. He goes, what's an HOA? So I had to explain that because I happen to be the president of our HOA down here. And I can't have a tower in my own community. But I said, there are rules that govern what you can and can't have. He said, how can the government tell you that you can't have an antenna? And I said, well, it's worse than that. It's not the government, it's your neighbors that are telling you that you can't have it. And he was having no part of that. And I tried some analogies. Hey, we have stop signs and stop lights. You have stop signs and stop. There's rules that we both have to follow. When it came to his house, no one was going to tell him what he could or could not do. The takeaway from that, though, was the more I talked to him, everything he knew about America was from radio, newscasts, newspapers, and that image of the U.S. was, we are so free over here, we can do whatever we want. So he could not understand why I didn't have an antenna, because I should be able to do it no matter what, because he can do whatever he wants with his place. But the more he talked about where he lived, I know I would never live there because he had more intrusive rules than what we live under. So, but that's kind of the funny part is people's perception around the world is based on whatever media that they listen to and from wherever they get it, which is why VOA started in the first place, was to counter what Adolf Hitler was putting out to the people of Germany.
Brainwashing.
The second story I had was another Polish guy, and come to find out in our talk that his father was a member of the Polish resistance during World War II. And the Polish resistance were our allies. And in turn, I got to tell him that my dad was a POW for 14 months in Germany. So we started getting to tell stories about the things that Dad never talked about. Not in a bad way. It was just like, what was your dad's demeanor? Did he ever talk about things? How long did he live? How did the family interact with all that? So since I was the youngest, I was kind of immune to everything that happened early. But so now I have a friend in Poland who I never would have met otherwise any other way. But we both shared stories, and it turns out that both of us had pictures. I got pictures of Dad, I got pictures of the POW camp. He sent me pictures of the Polish resistance rescuing our guys and taking those back to military bases. So I said, well, your dad might have been a part of a crew that helped rescue the guys.
That's right.
Dad's buddies who made it back. So those are the things that make the hobby fun, and that's why we do it.
I have a story that relates to that specifically. I used to have a ham radio in my car for travel.
Yes.
And I was coming home one evening and I heard a trucker say, "Does anyone close to me? I'm on a 16-wheeler. My back lights went out. My red lights, what do you call them?" And he says, "And I have to go to the terminal, but I don't want to get stopped by the police." I said, "Well, I happen to be right behind you. I will go ahead and put my what do you call it? Blinkers.
Flashers.
The what?
The flashlight.
Yeah, my flashers on, and I'll right behind you." So about 8-9 miles, I drove right behind him with my flashers on because he didn't, right up to the terminal. And so that was something that my radio and the ham radio in my car was able to help with this trucker, that I was right there to help him right there. So that's where that came in handy. That was years ago.
Yep. We have a lot of people who, in the early days of CB radio,
That's what
have actually, since a lot of the truckers have gotten the ham radio license and have put ham radios in their
Right.
trucks, because the ham radio or CB radio was limited to like a 5 or 6 mile.
Right.
So now, depending on the conditions outside, they can. I've gone to Wendy's with one of our guys that clown around a lot together. We were going to Wendy's one day, and he's talking to a guy in Italy.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
So not too many
Great.
people can go down Tylersville and talk to somebody in Italy,
That's cool.
that you never knew.
Wonderful.
But,
Huh.
probably some people were asking me in the other group about the age of hams. Of course, there's a lot of seasoned seniors in our group, but one thing that helped us tremendously, believe it or not, was COVID. Being cooped up for all that time, people said, "I need another hobby."
Reach
and
out.
We got them licensed and got them into it. The other thing was, we've gone after the kids, because the kids think that this does everything. It doesn't clean their bedroom, but it does everything else.
It doesn't fix your dinner
Um,
either.
And I'll give you a quick example before Lee has his group behind us. I asked the kids, I said, "How many of you have used a radio in the room?" And of course, no one raises their hand. And I said, "Well, when you're talking on your cell phone, it's a radio between your phone and a cell tower. So you have talked on a radio." I said, "Now, have you ever surfed the internet for something using Wi-Fi?" And they say, "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, Wi-Fi is a second radio that's inside of this phone." I said, "Did you ever use Apple or Google Maps to navigate?" I said, "The GPS signal is a third radio that's in here." I said, "Do you have Bluetooth speakers or a Bluetooth headphone?" That's a fourth radio that's in here. And the last one is if you have Apple Pay or Google Pay, where you swipe your phone across the terminal. It's called NFC, Near Field Communication. It's something encrypted for the payment system, but that's the 5th radio. So I tell the kids, I said, you've been using 5 radios and you took it all for granted. And I said, the most interesting thing is the day your cell phone quits, I'll still be on the air. So keep that in mind. And that's why some kids have gotten licensed, because they want to keep up with their buddies.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually have a couple of 9 years old who got
Really?
their highest class license. Yeah. So they have bragging rights too. So.
Wonderful. So you're an
I'm curious about, I've been watching your screen here, so I see these numbers pop up and the different colors and...
Those are radio beacons. What a ham operator has done is he's set up a radio and an antenna, and every couple minutes it's just putting out his call sign.
Okay.
So I would be able to look up that call sign and see where he's at. Someone asked me the same question before, because a call sign popped up right where the space station was. And I said, well, if you look closely, that space station was going right over Hawaii. So that's some ham that's in Hawaii.
Wow.
And the reason they set up beacons is if you're trying to reach someone that's in a certain part of the world, you can look at the map and you can see who's hearing who. So I can tell in from South Africa to North Africa up in the middle of Europe, I can tell those beacons keep popping up. So right now I should be able to get on the radio and talk to them pretty well. The other thing about the map is that big white dot over India, that's where the moon is right now.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
the reason that part of the screen is dark is because that's nighttime. The reason we keep track of that is if you notice right through the middle of Africa is where light and dark is. We call that the gray line because for some reason, I told you the signal bounces off of the atmosphere. It changes in that area, right in that gray line. So there are times when you can talk to people better and get a hold of them easier in the gray line than you could if it was the middle of the day or the middle of the night. So that's why we keep that map. And we also keep track of solar activity because some solar flares charge the atmosphere, which is what our signals bounce off. And of course, if there's too many solar flares, then the satellites burn up that are up there. So the flares are good and the flares are bad. And we always keep track of the weather because when bad weather comes, we usually have volunteers that come in and man things in case one of the especially during that heightened area, that because we could be called out in a heartbeat too. We have portable radios. Some of them are under the desk here. That I could take a portable radio right out to my car and I could be set up somewhere in about 5 minutes. So I encourage you to, when you walk out this corridor, right on the wall is our little wall of fame. So you'll see cards from around the world, the different operators. One of our, remember we don't talk about politics, but one of our favorite contacts, his fellow's name is Janis. He's from Slovenia. And there's a lady who was born in Slovenia who he's very proud of. And when I talked to him the other day, he said, Our Lady is back in the White House. So that's all he said. So we didn't talk any politics, but Melania happened to be from Slovenia, so he wanted to make sure we all knew that.
That's cool.
I thought that was funny.
Well, that's
And
good.
luckily, everybody else that was on the air, it went right over their heads. So.
We could say that we've got the vice president from Middletown.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
All right, well, you talked about Ruth Lyons, that's right down that hallway.
Oh, there you go. Get your answer.
That's,
Questions answered.
thank you. Where we grew up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
I have a picture
Very,
of
very
myself
interesting.
in a Cub Scout outfit on Larry Smith's puppet show.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then we tell them that too. Yeah.
No, I'm almost illiterate as far as that goes.
Yes, yeah, everybody that you've seen here today is around volunteers. Even the dozens that took you around and. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. What's the interrupt? Yes.
Here, I'll show you.
There's his dog from Scotland.
This is Giannis, he's the one,
from
he's the one
Scotland
from
that
Slovenia.
Oh, that said about,
No, he was the one that told us about Melania.
oh, that's cool,
okay.
that is cool. Did you already have that postcard, or did he just send it to you?
No, we've talked to him many a times.
Times, okay.
The reason we've talked to him many times is we've told him when we've had kids in here, that we've
Yeah.
had kids in here,
Yeah.
and he'll talk to the kids.
Really?
You know, a lot of them don't want anything to do with it, but he's talked to them, and he'll spend some time with them.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Oh, yeah, we've had lots of kids on the air, we put on the air.
That's good, that they, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a first grade teacher, so. So, hey.
Oh, I was thinking it was a step.
Yeah, I did too, that's why I looked at it.
I know, I did too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you still hungry?
Yeah, we're just trying to keep the legacy alive. And stuff like, you know, what you guys are involved with will help.
That no, so, doesn't look like Nick Moody.
Yeah.
That looks like Joe.